Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee, including those who are watching online. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the Green, where officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Does anyone intend to film or record audio of the meeting? I would advise that if filming does take place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Any speakers using the microphones in the middle may be picked up by the cameras recording the meeting, and members of the public in the public gallery behind them may have their image captured. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls or messages in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. I have the following members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item AO1, Councillor Austin, and item AO3, Councillor Smith. Would any other members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1 please announce it now? None, thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Green, who is substituted by Councillor Joanne Bright, and I have apologies from Councillor Moore. Are there any other apologies? I think everyone's here. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As Cabinet Member of the Council, I must declare an interest from item 4D to 4K.
Thank you, we've got that noted. Oh, sorry, Councillor Christian Bright. Mine's working, is yours? Those two are not working, hang on.
Have you unplugged it, Jules? Charles, have you unplugged it?
I think we need this row to move, if you don't mind, please. Well, unless you wish to not take part in the debate anywhere, otherwise you need to move, please. To a microphone that's working.
That's working.
Oh, you're not working either. Yep. Okay. We'll let you find somewhere else as well.
Is that working? It's red.
Councillor Boyd, can you just turn your... Councillor Boyd,
green.
Can you just make sure your mic is working?
Yep. Yeah.
Right, you're working. Councillor Alban, we know you're working. Councillor Uzeki and Councillor Rattigan, are you both?
It's gone red now.
Yeah, thank you.
That one's red.
Councillor Austin, can you check the members of the public microphones are working while you're walking around, please?
One worked.
Yeah, and back.
Oh,
These all work.
yeah, they're working.
Yeah.
Testing.
Okay, Councillor Bright, Councillor Christian Bright, now your turn again.
Yeah, I'd like to declare an interest as a Cabinet Member for the same ones, 4D onwards, I believe.
Lovely, thank you very much. We've got that noted as well. Okay, thank you everyone. So do members agree that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 17th of December 2025 be approved as a correct record? And can I have a proposer? Councillor Boyd, and a seconder, Councillor Rattigan. Thank you. Do members agree? Thank you. So, just to announce, item 4, any site visits will take place for committee members on the morning of Friday, the 6th of February. And now I'm going to hand over to the Planning Applications Manager for an update on item 4C, land north of Solar Park, Ebbsfleet Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. An update on this application. So a condition was incorrectly missed off the list published on this item. In the report, you'll note that there's recommended by Environmental Health in regards to a condition in terms of noise impact. And therefore the recommendation is updated to include the following condition, which is included in the summary consultation response from Environmental Health. So the condition, which would be condition 14, would read, the rating level of noise emitted from the proposed plant and equipment to be installed on the site shall not exceed the noise limits set out in the Noise Impact Assessment June 2025, which was undertaken in accordance with British Standard 4142 2014 and A1 2019 when measured and assessed at the nearest residential facade. The ground of that condition would be to protect the residential amenities of nearby occupiers in accordance with Thanet Local Plan Policy QDO3 and paragraph 135 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So moving on to public speaking, first item is item A01, which is the Queensbridge Road 1. So this is the one I have speaking, Councillor Austin. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Queensbridge Drive is a newish block of flats linked to the historic courthouse building in Cavendish Street in the heart of Ramsgate's central conservation area. The new flats were designed to fit well into the historic street opposite the Flint Cottage, believed to be the oldest building in town. This is a revised application. Officers turned down the first as the significant quantity and size of the telecoms equipment proposed for the roof of the flats, 6 dishes, 4 shared panel antennae and 3 cabinets, was obtrusive and inappropriate. The applicant reduced the height of the antennae by 1 metre and reapplied. Officers now recommend approval, against the advice of the Conservation Officer, who states the proposed equipment will still be clearly visible from within the conservation area and appear overly cluttered and entirely out of keeping. The host buildings had been sensitively designed to blend in with the historic and listed neighbouring properties. I do not think the revision is significant enough to have addressed my previous concerns. I object to the proposed development and think it would still detract from views within and around the conservation area, contrary to Thanet Local Plan Policy HE02. To refresh our memories, this policy states, within conservation areas, development proposals which preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the area will be permitted, provided they respond sympathetically to their setting, context and the wider townscape, including views into and out of conservation areas. The residents I represent agree with the Conservation Officer, and so does Ramsgate Town Council, which, quote, strongly objects to this development due to the impact on the skyscape. The Pride in Place Neighbourhood Board would also strongly object, I believe. They state in their recent 10-year vision for Ramsgate, Ramsgate's rich heritage is considered a defining characteristic. With a focus on heritage activation, Ramsgate is poised to redefine itself as a vibrant destination that celebrates its past while embracing a sustainable future. Ramsgate is a town with immense potential. Ramsgate is often said to have more listed buildings than Bath, well over 400. Sadly, they've not been able to benefit from the money and care Baths have had lavished upon them. Instead, given financial pressures and limits on officer time, Ramsgate's heritage is in danger of suffering death by 1,000 cuts. A set of white UPVC windows here, an extension without planning permission there, a set of modern telecoms equipment visible across the conservation area in a third place. Small things in themselves, perhaps, but uniting to foster a neglected, piecemeal feel to our streetscape, rather than preserving and celebrating the historic features of the vibrant, beautiful town Ramsgate is and can be. I urge you to support our local plan policy HE02 and help Ramsgate realise its immense potential through heritage activation, and to start by rejecting this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now hand over to the Principal Planning Officer to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site is located here. So this building here, you can see the 2 red squares, which are the roof of the building. So the proposal is for telecommunications equipment on the roof in these two locations. This is Cavendish Street running along here to the north of the top of the slide, and then you have Coleman's Yard running along here, and Effingham Street to the rear of the site. So this is the site to the centre of the screen here. So this is Queensbridge House. And this is a modern building that was constructed a number of years ago. Within the road, there are a number of listed buildings, and the site does lie within the conservation area. And you can see Cavendish Street car park on the left-hand side of the screen here. So this is a view from the side of the building. So again, in terms of looking at where the equipment's going, it's on the roof in this location here at the front, and in this location here at the rear of the building. And then this is a view taken from the rear of the building from Effingham Street. And again, this is the building here. So again, the equipment will be in this location at the front and this location here. So you can see, looking at this aerial view, you can see in terms of the surrounding area, the applicant is required to look at alternative sites as part of the development. So just looking at this, you can see the size of this building in comparison to some of the size of other buildings which are lower in scale, a number of which have pitched roofs, a number of which are listed as well. So I'll come to that later on, but just looking at that through this view at the moment. So taking you through some photos, this is a view from Cavendish Street looking at the front of the building. So again, the equipment would be at this location at the front here and at the rear here. And then just a further view back again of the front view of the building. And then if you were stepping further back, this would be the view you would get. So as you enter Cavendish Street from the High Street, the building is behind these trees here. Then looking towards the side of the building, this is the side view. Again, this is the side view from the car park. And then this is now taken from Coleman's Yard. And then this is further back from Coleman's Yard. So again, this is like the High Street behind us. So as you enter Coleman's Yard, you would be looking towards the building on this view here. And then this is now the front view onto Cavendish Street. And then this is the building on the far right-hand side here. And then another view with the building on the right-hand side here. So again, a number of properties within this road are listed. So one of the considerations is the impact on the setting of listed buildings as well as the setting of the conservation area. And then this is the rear elevation of the building. And then again, another view. So again, the equipment will be located on the roof in this location here. And then again, further back, taken from Effingham Street, looking towards the site. So again, you can see there are, in terms of the views through, they are restricted into particular locations. So again, if you were going further left or further right from this location, there would be limited views of the building with these properties that are in the street. And the only real view from this road is in this location here. So, as mentioned earlier, the applicant has had to look at alternative sites because the current equipment is on a property was on the property in Broad Street, which was owned by TDC, but notice to quit was given, and therefore they've had to remove the equipment and look for an alternative site. The equipment is currently located within Staffordshire Street car park, which has been with a new mast that's been erected there, but this is only an 18-month temporary period for this, which has been allowed to be carried out under permitted development, and following that they will need to remove that, and therefore an alternative location will need to have been found for this equipment. So this is just showing the coverage plan of of what they're looking for. So the red is very good indoor signal. The yellow, good indoor signal, and then it just goes down adequate variable. So what they're mainly looking for is the area in red to try and get as much indoor signal within the area as possible. So this plan shows the previously decommissioned site and the signal that achieved across the centre of Ramsgate. And then this is with the proposed Queensbridge Yard building, and this is showing us it's slightly wider in terms of the signal, so it can reach a slightly better area in terms of the indoor signal that this achieves. And if they don't achieve any replacement equipment, this is the signal across the centre of Ramsgate. Obviously, this is just for this mobile service. So this is for EE and H3G as well. And so that would be the signal within that location. So it is quite essential for them to find an alternative location, otherwise there will be a severe impact to telecommunications signals, which is fully supported by the MPPF. And the MPPF really requires us to support the expansion of electronic communications network and therefore support applications unless there's really a good harm that we would use to outweigh that benefit. So in looking for alternative sites, so the yellow circle is the search area that was been put forward by the applicant. The decommissioned site is in blue. The current mast that's a temporary is in orange in this location here, and the application site is the green in this location here. So the red locations were all considered as alternative sites. So 8 sites have been looked at as alternative sites across the search area, and they've all been discounted because the buildings have either been too low and therefore they couldn't achieve the necessary coverage, or the buildings were too small and so they couldn't accommodate the equipment that's required on the buildings, or the locations would be highly visible within the conservation area and quite exposed, and it would have potentially resulted in ground-based equipment rather than equipment on the roof of a building, which is what we would encourage because there's less impact. So this is just showing the conservation area outline. So the black dot in the middle is the application site, and the red outline is the conservation area, and this is pretty much the search area that's been looked at. Obviously it's a circle and we haven't been able to put that onto this plan, but the majority of the area that's being looked at is conservation area. So there's always going to be some harm to the conservation area because of the fact it has to be located in this area. So this is a proposed roof plan of the equipment. So this is the roof, so you can see an L-shaped roof here. The red at the front is showing the equipment to the front of the building, and then this is the equipment to the back. So I'll just show you a more detailed view of that. So there would be an antenna on the corner here, and an antenna on the corner here, and then a few dishes towards the centre here, and then another dish on the side here. This is the edge of the roof, so this is a parapet running around the edge of the roof, so they are set back from the front of the roof and slightly from the side of the roof as well. And then to the rear, again, this is the parapet running along here, so this is the edge of the roof, and then this is the equipment here, so again there'll be another antenna here and then another dish in this location here. So the rest of the lines are railings and other things associated with it, but the main things we're looking at are the antennas and the dishes, because they would be the equipment that would be raised and visible from ground level. So in terms of the elevations, this is the existing front elevation of the building, and then this was the originally proposed elevation. So the application that originally came in was for equipment that was 5.7 metres in height, and we have sought to amend this to try and reduce the impact. So we've asked them to reduce the height of this, and we also did ask them to set it back as much as they could in order to reduce views that you would see from it from ground level. They have been able to reduce the height by 1.5 metres, so the height is now at 4.2 metres from the roof level. They haven't been able to set it back any further though, because that would have impacted on the signal. So this is now obviously the plan that we're provided with, because anything lower than this or set back would impact on the signal and wouldn't achieve what they're trying to achieve in terms of coverage in Ramsgate. So you can see on this plan you've got an antenna on the left here and an antenna on the right here, and then the 2 dishes, and then the rest of them are low level railings that run around the site for safety reasons. Then this was the amended plan, sorry. So that was the original proposed, and that was the amended proposed, so that's it now showing at 4.2 metres in height. Then this is the existing rear elevation, and this is the proposed rear elevation, so this again is showing it at 4.2 metres in height. This plan does actually show the front ones on it as well as the rear ones, so it does look quite cluttered, but you're actually seeing the distant aerials as well, so there would actually only be one antenna on this side, and the other 2 are actually on the other side, so it's 3 in total across the roof. And then this is the side view of the antenna, so again the 2 on the front and the 1 on the rear, and the dishes and equipment. So we've asked them to look at a few viewpoints to show us how this would look on the roof. So we've had a viewpoint from Cavendish Street to the front, and then further along Cavendish Street, and then we've also got one from Coleman's Yard. So I'll just show you those. So this is from Cavendish Street, looking towards the application site here, and then this is the visual, so you can see the antennas on the top of the roof in this location here. And then this is the view from, again, Cavendish Street towards the other end. Again, the front of the building here and the left and the side of the building here, and then this would be the height of the equipment. So they are coloured greys to try and blend in with the sky as much as possible when it's cloudy. And then this is the view from the rear, and then you can see the equipment at the rear here, and again you can see the equipment from the front here. And then there's just a few detailed views of the antenna. So obviously it does lie within the conservation area. We do have an objection from the conservation officer on the grounds that in her view this would have some impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area, will detract from its historic setting. It is obviously a modern building rather than a historic building, which we feel is a benefit. In terms of their location on the roof, 2 lots of equipment are required to achieve the coverage thereafter, and they do need to be separated rather than placed in one location, and this is due to the structural load of the building and minimum space requirements, so there is a need for them to be in these 2 separate locations. As I mentioned, there is a real need for us to consider the benefits of telecommunication equipment. This is supported by the MPPF and by our own policies in the local plan as well. And when considering the impact on the conservation area, we have to weigh the harm with the public benefits of the proposal. And in this case, the telecommunication benefits are considered to be a public benefit that would outweigh the visual harm, given the fact we have had it amended and tried to get it down as much as possible, and given the fact that alternative sites have been considered and there's no better site within the search area that we consider to be appropriate. The ICNIRP certificate has been submitted, so we don't consider there's any health grounds for refusal. And therefore, we do consider that it is recommended for approval, as I mentioned, on the grounds that the public benefits outweigh the harm, and therefore it is in accordance with policy QD07, which supports telecommunications equipment and the MPPF. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Alban first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, here we are, modern technology situated within the conservation area. So it's we all want to get a site. We all want to use our mobile phones and our Wi-Fi and whatever. I think the issue that I had was looking at the drawings, not of these, not what's there now. It looked really like a load of clutter, like that and that. It looked like a load of clutter. And one of the questions I was going to ask, but which you actually answered, was could they not be pushed into the centre of the roof of the building, so therefore there will be little or next to nothing. But as I take it, the company or the applicant has said that they can't be pushed in together because it will affect it. But I just wonder about that. I mean, I know by any stretch of imagination, a bit of Neanderthal really, but if they push it back any further, they're going to lose a signal. Come on, I don't really see that. But that's just me, being a bit of an old sod. But anyway, as I said, the drawing shows a lot more clutter, and the photograph you had with the one point sticking up in here, one aerial sticking up in here, doesn't reflect the drawing, and that's what worries me a little bit. That they've obviously produced that. It's not been produced by officers. They've produced that, and that's what worries me. Is that you could say, because if that is how it was, I can't see a problem. There's no problem with it. But that's not what it looks like on that building, in that photo. So thank you for that. I just want to listen to what other members have got to say.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on that point, because there are a couple of things there. So, from our perspective, obviously we have sort of taken what the applicant has stated in terms of not being able to move it back in further into the roof, in good faith. The rationale behind that position from officers is that the applicant has been very willing to make as much amendments as possible. So the change and reduction in the type of equipment to drop down the height by 1.5 meters. Also, the impact for them in terms of moving it back in further into the site, it doesn't change the fact that the equipment's still going to be put there, paid for, etc. So there isn't really a reason why they wouldn't do it if they could, because if it would have resolved the conservation officer's concerns, it would clearly benefit the applicant, because then that would be less of a concern, and less of a concern for us as well. So, we have taken that on the basis of what's been given. Just in terms of the perspective views, they are a perspective. They are not what would be conditioned if this gets approved. But at the same time, the flat elevation, clearly people will not see that. That is a flat elevation. Emma identified the fact that the actual antennas themselves are set back from the parapet, so it will limit, due to the angle from when you're on street view, the extent to which you will see the aerials. I think we're not making any, we're not pretending you're not going to see it. You are going to see it, and we've identified that quite clearly in terms of the harm. But it is that all-important weighing up, and it has been made very clear through government guidance, through the MPPF, about the weight to be given to telecommunications applications. And obviously, it has been demonstrated that there is no preferable location on the top of buildings within the conservation area. And certainly, if the application, if officers or members would seek to refuse the application, at appeal, that evidence would be put forward to say, well, we've looked at the alternative sites. The government guidance is quite clear that you should look at mast sharing on tall buildings, and there aren't any better options within this area. And it will be a case of, depending on what an inspector looks at in terms of weighing the fact that this would, if it wasn't approved and there were no other locations, it would result in a diminishing of network coverage in Ramsgate. And how much weight that's given is obviously one of the points that we've taken into account. But it's a balanced case. There is harm, and it's about whether or not that's outweighed by the benefits. And obviously, we've put the position forward that we think it should be approved. Thank you.
Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, because the application talks about shared panel antenna, 3 dishes and 3 cabinets. Do we have any diagrams showing what they look like, and are they the ones that are going to be sort of set behind the parapet, so they're not? Is the antenna the only bit that's going to be visible if you look up, or is the other kit, which we haven't seen any diagrams of, also going to be up there? Can't really see from here. Haven't moved to the back row.
So the antennas are obviously the taller elements of it. So you can see here, you've got the low-level railings. The dishes are here, so you can see the 3 circles. They're the dishes, and then the equipment cabinets are in this location here. So all of the railings, cabinets, and dishes are all pretty much probably, maybe, looking at that, 2 meters maybe from roof level, because they're about halfway up, and the whole thing's 4.2. So they're potentially no more than 2 meters high, and then you've got the other 2 meters of the antenna. So
basically, the antenna is the bit that's going to be visible. The other bits are unlikely to be visible because they're going to be behind. They just look like railings.
Yeah, they're much less visible because they are set back. You've got the parapet there, so potentially there's going to be the roof level and then a parapet that's going to be slightly higher as well. And given their limited height, from the angle, from a 4-storey building looking up, you're not really going to see those lower elements. You're just going to see the antennas really sticking above it.
Councillor Makinson.
I live just round the corner from this and will obviously benefit from a better signal. But yesterday, I think it was, I wandered all around the building and I looked at the other buildings that were around, and I'm not sure where you are going to be in order to see that. You're not going to see it from the ground. There are some buildings in Cavendish Street that I think mainly belong to a solicitor's office, and you probably will see it from the top floor of that. But I don't think this is going to be very intrusive on a modern building in the conservation area. I think it's perfectly acceptable. Thank you.
Councillor Wing.
Personally, I think it's bonkers. I mean, we sit here and have discussions about whether we should be approving heritage-style windows in houses in the conservation zone, and now we're having a discussion about, is it a 16-foot-high thing on the sore thumb on the top of the building? But I'm going to ask this question, and then Ian might have to do some searching. I believe, because if you look at that building, it's actually a monstrosity. It was the old police station. It was further down's the police station, and then we've got this grotesque thing that is built there. And if I remember rightly, TDC actually refused that application, and it went for a government approval. I did try to find the application, but it must have been pre-internet. But I'll carry on, because I want to know what was the reason for the original refusal, because it might have a bearing on a refusal for this bit. I fully support, so I'll carry on while we can try and find that. I'll carry on. I fully support the conservation officer. They not only refused it the first time, but they refused it the second time. And I want to remind people that the skyscape of a conservation area is significantly important as well. And if you've ever had the chance to actually go up St George's Tower, you know, a grade 1 listed building, I'm absolutely certain you'd be able to see this telecommunication from there. And I think maybe I'm a bit bonkers, because I do really love looking at skyscapes. I love going up high and looking across rooftops. And there is something very, very special about seeing heritage style roofs and chimney pots at a high level. So although it can't be seen from the floor, everybody on the opposite side of the road will see that. I'm also worried about the noise impact of the residents living in the flat below, because we have high winds. They gust round Harbour Towers, where I park my car. You can hear rattling from the harbour when we've got high winds from masts and bits of structure there. So I'm really worried about the noise impact to the people who live below. I also want to say there is an alternative site. It's staring us in the face. This was originally on a building that we now own. I'm not sure if that is in the conservation zone, our building that we've purchased. Had the original installation on top. I don't believe it is in the conservation zone, although I'm quite happy to be corrected on that, because it's not my ward. But to say there isn't an alternative site is wrong, because it could go back on the original building if TDC would allow that, i.e. us. So I'm not happy with this at all. I don't want, I think it'll ruin our skyscape, our heritage skyscape. But it would be interesting to know why the original application was refused, and I'm sure it went to a PINS decision.
We will come back to you on some of those points, Councillor Wing. I'm going to go to another couple of speakers first, though, so if you just bear with us.
I also think, I'd just like to add that I support Councillor Alban. It would have been really useful if we'd have had a virtual image of it, as we do with some applications.
Okay, Councillor Rizeki.
Thank you, Chair. I think actually, I understand it's in a conservation area, but once you put the modern building in there, we've got to accept the fact that modern things are going to go on a modern building. The need for phone masts, etc., we know that that's a public requirement nowadays rather than just a jolly for anybody who's got money can afford a mobile phone. Everyone's got one now, and they all mean that you're going to have more masts, etc. in the area. If this was a grade 1 listed building, I'd be probably totally against it, but as it's a brand new modern building or newish, I think I'd have to accept that these masts wouldn't be such a detriment and would go with the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Christian Bright.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Emma. I feel a bit odd because maybe it's because I've moved seats, but I'm about to agree violently with Councillor Rosecki. I don't think what the skyscape looks like from a vantage point of a church tower is a valid reason for refusal. I'm with Councillor Wing in that I enjoy flaneuring around a city and taking a look around at buildings, and actually what I do genuinely like is to see a variety, and I don't mean just a variety in architectural styles. I like the melding of tradition and modern technology. I personally don't think we've got a strong enough reason to reject it. Looking at why that building was rejected in the first place, I kind of fail to see the relevance, if I'm honest, because that building is there and this is a planning application based on what is there today. It's a modern building, it's modern infrastructure that residents need. You know, Ramsgate is a lovely town, it is a heritage area, but it's not a museum. It's a working place where people live and people need to make phone calls and access technology. I can't see a reason for rejecting this.
Okay, I'm just going to hand back over to the Planning Applications Manager.
Thank you. Yeah, just to clarify, the application, I must admit, I know of the history of the building, and I wasn't aware that it was refused and was approved on appeal. I've found the application, which was the outline application in 2004 for 82 flats as it then was, which was approved by the District Council, and then the reserved matters in 2007 was subsequently approved. I can't speak to whether or not there was a previous approval before that. A previous refusal before that. I don't believe that there was. However, I suppose to the general point, obviously we are working with what's been built, what's been granted in those terms. And just for clarity, the other site in Broad Street, which is the sort of other side of Cleaver Lane, where the mast was, 5 Broad Street, I believe it was, that is in the conservation area as well. Obviously, that's a tall building that's had communications masts on for a number of years, so it's kind of expected and known about in the wider context. So yeah, just to clarify those 2 points.
Okay, do I have any other questions or comments or speakers? No, in which case we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation to the vote. Would those in favour please indicate? Those against? And abstentions? So that's carried. Thank you. Okay, the next item for public speaking is AO2, which is the land adjacent to 87 Minster Road, Westgate. I have public speaking in favour of the application, Georgina Keenan. Georgina, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, members. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application on behalf of the applicant. This submission for the erection of 2 3-bedroom detached dwellings will provide residential family properties within a sustainable location within Westgate-on-Sea. The application site forms part of a larger strategic housing allocation supported by policy SP17 of the Thanet local plan. This 22-metre by 30-metre land parcel is adjacent to number 87 Minster Road and will therefore extend the built-up frontage of Minster Road by just 2 dwellings, representing an infill scheme. The reason it has come forward as a separate application is because it is in separate land ownership. to the rest of the larger strategic allocation, which covers over 95 hectares, which itself is the subject of a hybrid application for up to 2,000 dwellings that is supported by an illustrative master plan. Your officer's report also concludes that the principle of residential development should be supported. The proposed development has been informed and is consistent with the master plan layout for the wider allocation. The two-storey height and siting of the dwellings are consistent with the dominant building line and character of the street scene. The elevational treatment of each dwelling and materials proposed are high quality, attractive and including red brickwork, gabled roofs and bay windows to the front elevation. Dwelling 1 is located in excess of 10 metres to the south of number 87 Minster Road, with intervening land and a substation separating the proposed development to that property, safeguarding the residential living conditions of the neighbouring property. Your officer's report supports the design, scale and siting of the dwellings and acknowledges that the proposal will safeguard the living conditions of the nearest residential dwellings and have a positive impact on the character and appearance of the locality. The proposed dwellings also have generous rear gardens, on-plot parking and good outlook to the windows to the front and rear. During negotiations, revisions of the plans were requested by KCC Highways. These amendments involved a slight widening of the footpath so that it was consistent with the existing footpath to the north. The updated amendments were supported by the Highway Authority. The proposal also provides biodiversity and ecological benefits through the provision of mixed scrub, 6 trees and additional landscape planting, as well as construction for a local builder. The support for this recommendation on an allocated site will improve housing delivery in the district. In summary, the site represents a moderate extension to the existing Minster Road frontage, which is in accordance with the master plan for the wider allocation, providing 2 high-quality designed family dwellings which will be attractive to a local SME builder. For these reasons, we hope that you will support your officer's recommendation to approve this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking against the application, Jackie Brown, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The site is adjacent to the junction at St Bennett's Road on the very busy Minster Road, so I have serious concerns about road safety for motorists and pedestrians, especially as I live close to the proposed development just off St Bennett's Road, so will be affected by this issue on a daily basis. The St Crispin's Infant School is located on St Crispin's Road, and Minster Road and St Bennett's Road gets very busy with parents and carers walking and driving their children to school along these 2 roads at the beginning and end of the school day at peak commuter times. Chartfield School, which is an infant and primary school, is also located further along Minster Road, so increases my concerns about traffic and road safety in the area. The future of the North Thanet Link Road is far from certain, so we cannot rely on this as a solution for Thanet's traffic problems, and any benefits will soon be eroded by the amount of development that Thanet has already taken and is continuing to take place across our district. I think that the development is out of character for the area, as the houses won't fit in with the white houses next to them. This is a historic area of Westgate and should be preserved. Thanet has some of the best farmland in the country, and this land in particular grows high-yield crops. Farmers are able to sow and plant crops weeks earlier than in other areas of the country. Quex Estate currently farms this land using nature-friendly methods. We have very little farmland left in Thanet, so I think it is important to preserve any small pockets of farmland that we can. If the application for 2,000 houses on this very field and the field adjacent to it is approved, the land that this application sits on will become of vital significance to wildlife like small mammals, slowworms and pollinators, and especially field birds like skylarks, which are present in the field and can be heard in the fields. It is one of the sounds of summer. There has been a 13% decline from farmland birds on average in the past 5 years, and a 64% decline since 1970. The source of this information is the RSPB, which is why skylarks are on the red list of endangered species, as are slowworms. Thank you for listening to my concerns and views about this application, and I hope that you will take them into consideration when making your decision and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report.
Thanks, Chair. This is the application site here outlined in red. So this is Minster Road on the left. This is Richborough Road to the north. And this is an aerial view of the site, so currently in agricultural use. And then again, looking at the application site in this location here, so you can see in terms of the surrounding properties, it's next to two-storey semi-detached properties, and again opposite the site are a number of two-storey terraced and semi-detached properties. And then again another view of it here, so again this is the application site in this location here. These are some photos. This is from Minster Road looking towards the application site, so again the application site is in this location here. And then again off to the left, then this is Minster Road leading up to Shottendane Road in the distance. And then again, this is the application site here, adjacent to number 87. And then again, this is the application site on the right-hand side here. And then these are some properties opposite the site, so you see the character of the existing properties and the designs. And then just a view looking towards, again, the application site on the right-hand side, just so you can see the context of the site in relation to surrounding development. So the site does lie within the housing allocation for Minster, which falls under policy, Westgate, sorry, not Minster, Westgate for policy SP17, which is allocated for 2,000 dwellings. There's a pending application in at the moment for that site, and a master plan has been submitted with that application. This site is within a separate ownership, so this is the location of the site here, and this is in a separate ownership to the rest of the strategic site. And just while I'm showing you this, I'll also show you this site here at the top here, which was Briery Close, which was a development which originally formed part of the strategic site, but was developed a number of years ago through which was allowed appeal. So in terms of the master plan, just to show you the site, so the site is in this location here. The red line shows the other pending application for the 2,000 dwellings. And in terms of the master plan, the reason for the master plan is to make sure that there's not going to be any impact on the delivery of on the strategic site. So by having a master plan, it's clear that how that number of units can be delivered across the site. So in terms of looking at the zoomed in part of this master plan, you can see that the intention is that there would be dwellings that front onto Minster Road along this location here, and that there would be potentially pairs of dwellings, and in terms of the size of the site that's remaining, it's similar in size to two dwellings that you can see from the master plan. So this is the proposal, which is for two dwellings. So they are detached rather than semi-detached. They are set back from the front, following the front building line of the neighbouring properties. You can see the decent-sized plots in keeping with surrounding pattern and development. There's parking to the front of the site for 4 vehicles and a central access point. They're looking at extending the footpath along, so that continues along the frontage. And you can see this area that's dark green that extends around the site is like a biodiversity buffer planting area around the edge. And then this is an analytical plan for it, so similar, just showing again the parking to the front, the hedge planting around the frontage. Within the rear there would be the cycle and refuge store, and potential for a heat pump in this location here is annotated on the plans. And again, the green area is the ecological buffer that would run around the site, so the actual curtilage of the plots would extend along this dotted line here. So this is the front elevation of plot 1. So in terms of the appearance of it, it's considered to be quite a well-designed plot. It has interesting features: chimneys, a double bay gable, sliding sash design windows, front porch. The materials would be red brick, dark tiles and some white render. So that's the front elevation. Side elevation, so you see a dual pitch and then a small extension at the rear, and the rear elevation, and then the side elevation, and then you can see the floor plans. So it's a three bed dwelling. And then the other property, similar in design, with the side view, rear view, other side view, and again showing it as a 3-bed dwelling. This is an indicative street scene, so it's not 100% potentially accurate because it hasn't used a topographical survey from the site, but it does show in terms of scale that the buildings are similar in scale to the neighbouring properties. So they would be 2-storey with a pitched roof. And you can see that in terms of the spacing between the properties, these are considered to be adequate spacing in keeping with the pattern of development. This is essential access, so there's adequate visibility from the site to the road, so there's no concerns raised by KCC highways. Obviously, it's only 2 dwellings, so it has been mentioned about the potential impact on highway safety, but with only 2 dwellings, this would generate very few vehicle movements from the site. And as I mentioned, there would be an extension of the footpath along here, so that is considered to be a small improvement that allows for increased pedestrian movement along Minster Road. So obviously there is a need for housing. The site is allocated for housing. In terms of the loss of agricultural land, because of the allocation, that sort of overrides the loss of agricultural land because that's already being considered through the allocation. In terms of ecology, KCC Biodiversity have considered the application. There is a 20% biodiversity net gain being achieved on site as a result of the ecology buffer that you saw from the site plan. Sorry, just head back to the site plan. So yeah, with that being provided, that achieves the 20% biodiversity net gain. In order to prevent that from being consumed into the curtilage of the property in the future, there's a condition that would remove permitted development rights to erect any new boundary treatment within the site. So all they could do is to erect the boundary treatment as shown on the curtilage line shown here. So that would allow for the rest of the site to be maintained as a biodiversity land in the future. And KCC have confirmed that the buffer would also benefit breeding birds, so there will be some impact on breeding birds, but by introducing these improvements to biodiversity, that would help to benefit breeding birds. And there is a condition to do with lighting as well, to restrict any lighting on birds or bats in the location. So it does comply with policy. The development is considered to be in keeping with the surrounding pattern development. The design is considered to be of good quality. The impact on the highways is minimal, and everything to do with ecology and archaeology and drainage have all been met. A legal agreement has been submitted securing the SPA contribution, and therefore it is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. And speaking first, I have Councillor Christian Bright.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Emma. So I'm not going to rehash the tired old arguments about local plans and housing numbers, etc. This is a proposal for two homes on strategically allocated land. The Highways Authority have said it's safe. I'm looking at that where I'm seeing a pavement extended to the extent of the land. Given the size of the land and that owner, I don't see what utility that land would have as anything else in the long term. They're good quality houses. I really fail to see how I can be convinced that this isn't just a standard positive application.
Thank you. Councillor Alban.
He's just said it all, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Garner.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something. So this is on the land allocated, as has been mentioned, SP 17, allocated for 2,000 houses, of which this is 2 of them. Is that right?
No, the application that's pending is for 2,000. This would be an additional 2 houses.
Okay, all right. I mean, 2,000, 2002. Fair enough. The impact on wildlife, the impact on breeding birds, the impact on biodiversity on this little bit of land, it will have an impact. But obviously, it's very minimal. It's the wider. You've got acres of fields where the breeding birds will be impacted, where the biodiversity will potentially be impacted. So doing it 2 houses at a time, these 2 not going to have an impact, the next 2 not going to have an impact. But when you add them all up, it will have an impact. So, but I guess as we're only looking at this one, it's going to be very difficult to argue against that. Those discussions and arguments maybe we will have if and when the 5-year-old or 6-year-old now application for the 2,000 houses come before us. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I mean, yes, obviously we don't, with these strategic allocations, there would be a clear issue if lots of smaller applications came forward trying to take chunks out of it. Because obviously the reason why there's the strategic allocation in terms of the policy is to try and outline all of the different things the site needs to bring forward. There are, as we've had before with the Birchington site, sometimes ownership and land assembly things that mean that you do get these pockets of this site being separate in ownership and therefore not within the application that's been before the council, as you say, since 2020. So it is something that we obviously need to be aware of, but it doesn't, when taking this application at face value, we don't think there's the conflict with the strategic policy because it is limited to this site by virtue of that ownership issue. So we don't think there's the harm, and we certainly don't think it conflicts with the allocation.
No, I don't. I fully understand that. I guess if this little pocket of land wasn't owned by, not that this is going to make a great deal of difference, but if this wasn't owned by someone different and it was owned by the same person as the other one, then we would still have that outline application for 2,000 houses. We wouldn't have an outline application for 2,002 houses. But because this is owned separately, it's just an additional 2. But like I say, it's not going to make a great deal of difference.
Councillor Matterface.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Emma to go back to some of the street scene, not the houses immediately next door, but you had pictures of other houses in the same road. Would you be kind enough? I think you had some that were on the right-hand side of your screen. Yeah. What is planned? I don't know, are they semis or mixture? It doesn't look that different to what's there, so I can't see an issue. I tend to agree with what everybody else has said. This is one application for 2 houses, which has to be looked at separately to the allocation and the pending one that you're talking about. So I can't see an issue with it.
Okay, I don't have any other speakers, so we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. Would those in favour please show? And so there's no against, so that's carried. Thank you very much. So I'll just allow those who are getting up to go. Thank you. All right, so we now move on to item AO3, which is the land north of Solar Park, Ebbsfleet Lane, Ramsgate. Public speaking in favour of the application, Billy Popple. Thank you. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening all. My name is Billy and I represent Grenergy, the developers before the proposal before you today. I'm sure that you are all aware of the dangers of the current climate crisis and the need for renewable and clean energy projects to be rolled out. Thanet, alongside 82% of district councils in England, have declared a climate emergency, acknowledging that climate change is an urgent, existential threat requiring immediate, drastic action beyond business as usual, committing to rapid carbon reduction and supporting sustainable transitions. With this in mind, the UK has made impressive strides in expanding renewable energy, with wind and solar now forming a key part of our electricity mix. However, these renewable sources are intermittent and need to be used as and when they are produced, unlike a commodity such as coal, which can be stored and chosen to be used in times of demand. By meeting the government's goal of 27 gigawatts of BESS by 2030, the energy system will have the facilities to effectively commoditise renewable energy by storing it at times where there is high supply, such as high winds and clear skies, and dispatching it at times of high demand or low supply, thus avoiding the cost to consumers of turning off renewable energy plants, which for offshore wind alone in 2025 total just under £1.5 billion. This EBS fleet proposal is for that much-needed BESS technology. The land parcel is shared with an existing solar farm and adjacent to further energy infrastructure, including an anaerobic digester and Richborough Energy Park and substation. Alongside the location, the social and environmental impacts, including noise, drainage, ecology and traffic considerations, have all been thoroughly assessed by qualified experts on behalf of ourselves and by those appointed by the Planning Authority. And through a period of consultation, we have no ongoing objections to the design or implementation of the site. Furthermore, we have only one public objection by Minster Parish Council, whose main query revolves around the safety of the site. In terms of safety, we followed and complied with national guidance during the design of the site, and then consulted with the Kent Fire and Rescue Service to ensure they were happy for the site to be approved. Moving forwards, we will continue to consult with the KFRS to ensure best practice and guidance is followed, and that plans are continuously updated according to our ongoing dialogue. I'd like to also take a moment to directly address that the technology, lithium-ion, used within this proposal has a higher thermal runaway temperature and is more chemically stable than nickel manganese cobalt, which was used at the Moss Landing fire and Carnegie Road Liverpool fire. Now, in conclusion, this proposal supports a technology that is urgently needed to transition to a clean, resilient energy system. It aligns with local and national policy, follows strict safety guidelines, and has proven to cause no social nuisance or environmental harm, as supported by your trusted statutory consultees. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking as ward councillor under section 20.1, Councillor Smith. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And thanks to Greenwich's Billy, who reassured me that the batteries are LFP with a lower fire risk than NMC, but a higher toxicity. I support renewable energy and battery storage, and I don't even want this application refused exactly, but the application is incomplete and it must be refused. 2 drainage authorities object. River Stour IDB has serious reservations that cast doubt on the feasibility of the drainage plan, including drainage across land that Greenwich does not own and no landowner agreements. KCC notes that it hasn't been demonstrated that an off-site outfall is even required. Has infiltration testing been done? Critical consents have not been obtained, and planning permission does not confer them. The applicant's own modelling shows 50+ cubic metres flooding the electrical compound, 7 junctions overwhelmed, and 5 at flood risk. It discharges to the River Stour, 85 metres from 2 SSSIs, a National Nature Reserve, and Ramsar wetlands. Their own engineers admit it fails, or it will fail. LFP fires do still happen. Germany had 3 last year, 1 fatal, and they burn for 8+ hours, releasing toxic hydrofluoric acid. 90 cubic metres of firewater containment in an area that floods with 50. Where does the contaminated water go? What are the consequences for residents and our environment when, not if, this fails? Minster Parish deserves an answer to their concerns. They represent residents. Last year, a BESS with NMC batteries, which are arguably more dangerous than LFP, was waved through, and on the assumption that the people on higher pay grades were unconcerned and must have our best interests at heart. Does that still hold? 3 statutory consultees object. Greenwich data shows failure. Critical permissions are missing. This is your decision and our responsibility. You refused Broadstairs BESS for lesser concerns. Please vote with great care. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now hand over to the Planning Applications Manager to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. The application site, there we go, is outlined in red. So the proposal is for the installation of a battery storage system with all associated works, landscaping, vehicular access, utilisation, etc. The main issues for the application are the principal development, the impact on the countryside, impact on drainage, ecology, neighbours and fire safety as well. So site location, it is outside the urban confines, so it comes under policy SP24, which is development in the countryside, and also looking at SP26, which is the landscape character areas, of which is in the Stour Marshes. So it doesn't automatically fit within the criteria that's outlined in policy SP24 about development in the countryside. But therefore it falls to consider what the impact of the development is in terms of the character of the countryside on a principal point. It is, however, also covered by policy SP37, which refers to the need for new development in the district to respond to climate change and provide the resilience through use of up-to-date technologies, as well as the national policy statement on energy, which identifies the provision of battery energy storage as a critical national priority, and therefore very significant weight should be given to its provision in terms of planning applications. So you can see that the site is surrounded by a combination of the A256, you've got the solar park that's to the west of the A256, but actually the site has a smaller solar farm within it, or sort of between the two parcels. You have the Stoneleys golf course, which is to the east, and then the Ebbsfleet roundabout, which is just offshot to the south. So this is the aerial image that shows the site. So the site is predominantly in this area here. You can see the sort of bare earth. So back to this, we're just going to go through some of the images from the actual road level. So starting at the south of the site, looking at the first of two vehicular access points. Oh, sorry, sorry. Let me just go to the vehicular access point first. There we go. So this is the vehicular access point at the south of the site. You've then got progressing up Ebbsfleet Lane, and this is looking back to the south. So this is the vehicular access to Stoneleys golf course. So the site is on your right-hand side. And then this is the vehicular access at the top of the site, which then run with the vehicular access running down beside the boundary hedging that's in the centre of the site there. So this is the hedge that runs along that section at the moment. So you can see at the moment there isn't really a lot of visibility into the site as it is. This is an aerial image taken, again, it's the isometric from Google, so I appreciate it's more to give you an idea of where things are. So you can see there's the access to Stoneleys there. You've got an existing access that's here to be utilised. There's the other access which is all the way down the other end here. And then you've got the solar small solar PV panels between the site, and this is the bare earth area here, the main area of the location of battery storage. And then this is a view from the other way, looking back towards Stoneleys in the background. So this is the area of bare earth again. Unsurprisingly, we've had to take the image from the road from Google Street View. This is a view of the site, so you can see that there's a slight sort of bank there and change in level, but the visibility into the site is limited to non-existent in terms of the immediate location. So this is a plan showing the development. So as mentioned, the top of the image, you've got the vehicular access that's to the north of the Stoneleys vehicular access. The layout of the site has a ring around it with fencing around it in terms of vehicular access, the actual battery storage in the centre. You have two of the tanks, which I'll come back to, one at the north and one at the south, and two access points, as mentioned, at the top and bottom of the site. So then down at the southern part of the site, this is where you have an attenuation basin, which links to the surface water drainage strategy, which I will come back to in a bit more detail. So just looking then at the real detail of the actual units themselves and the layout, as mentioned, you've got the dotted line that goes around the site, which is the security fencing. These black dots along that security line is the CCTV cameras. Then you've got the green units themselves are the actual batteries themselves. The power stations are the sort of black rectangles. Then you've got transformers that are the smaller green ones interstitially within the site. And then you've got a number of ancillary structures to serve the actual workings of the site to the south of this section. So just quickly going through those to show you what they look like. You've got the battery units itself, so that's 2.8 metres high. Wrong button. Then you've got the a sort of set of sort of double container units with a small sort of office provision, which is 2.4 metres high. You've then got the distribution network operator building, which is effectively a switchboard managing the connection to the grid. So that's a single-storey building. So that is just over 5 metres in height, but it's 2.9 metres to the well, it's about 3 metres to the eaves before pitching away, and it's a relatively small building. You've then got the power stations themselves. That's about 2.6 metres high. You've got the water tank itself, so that's 1.75 metres high. So there are two of those, each holding 120,000 litres water. You've then got the transformers, so those green squares sort of between all those units, so they're about 2.1 metres high. And then the tallest building that's on the site for the proposal, which is the switchgear building, which is 4.6 metres in height. You have got the CCTV poles, which are similar in height, and then the fencing around there, which is 2.4 metres in height. So overall, those structures are not, in the large majority, they are not excessively high. They're only a little bit over what you'd expect to see with a 2 metre high fence. Obviously, some of them are protruding a bit higher than that. They are in an area which would mean that some of those buildings will be visible above the boundary screening from the road, but it's not considered to result in any significant harm to the landscape character area or indeed the countryside by virtue of the limited visibility of the site at the moment. In terms of ecology and landscaping, so this has been looked at because the site and the application has a requirement for providing the biodiversity net gain of the statutory requirement of 10%. So as part of the submission, it's looked at the existing habitat that's on the site. You have a number of trees along the boundary, and there are proposals to remove the trees along from the north of the site to get the two vehicular accesses in, so to get the access in from the north. These trees have been looked at by the council's planning assistant who deals with trees. There is an arboricultural impact assessment that's been put in, and those trees are not of sufficient quality to TPO, and there are provisions that are made within the proposal to improve the landscaping on the site, or at least provide offsetting landscaping within the site around the storage units. So this is a plan to show the provision of the hedgerow around the site. So there is going to be some filling in of the hedgerow where there are gaps along on Ebbsfleet Lane, as well as reinforcement of the hedgerow to the west of the site. Biodiversity net gain, however, would need to be achieved via the purchasing of off-site credits or via providing something off-site through purchasing off-site credits or statutory credits. It's likely to be that they would be credits within the district first, because that's obviously what the aim of this would be. We do have a site which is going through the registration process at the moment in Moncton, which a number of sites are likely to try and buy units off, which is obviously what our preference is, to make sure that these things go within the district. That the application would be subject to the statutory condition that is put on every single planning permission when BNG is required. And there is also provision within the list of conditions for a habitat management and monitoring plan to be provided for all of the habitat that they're providing on site. Part of that is predominantly provided to the south of the site, where you have the attenuation basin, where there are proposals to you basically look at the some additional grassland, because the main loss of habitat on the site is that type of habitat unit. It is the area habitat units that are lost through the development of the battery storage facility. So in terms of drainage, so this has been looked at repeatedly by the Internal Drainage Board of the Stour and also by KCC as the local lead flood authority. So the comments of KCC are provided within the report. Unfortunately, the heading of KCC's comments has not been bolded by yours truly when editing the report, so you might initially not see them, because we did receive updated comments on the 4th of December following further submissions about this, because the key query that came up was the viability of an off-site outflow. So just going through the proposal, you've got these are the surface water drains that would be installed on the site, which would then lead to a flow, and you can see from the dotted blue lines, down to where the attenuation basin is. So this is just to deal with surface water flows. So the attenuation basin would be where the water is held. There is then restrictions on how much is let out into the into the new drain that would be created, with an outflow which would be subject basically to the highway, which is subject to separate approvals under the Highways Act, and with then a separate discharge to watercourse, which also would need separate approval through different legislation to planning. One of the key points in terms of the attenuation basin and the routes around there is the fact that there's going to be a penstock valve included within before you basically go from the attenuation basin to any outflow. That's effectively a sluice gate to stop anything in the event of an incident on the site, to stop any contamination of the outflow from any sort of boundary cooling that's happening if there were to be an incident. So what we have done in terms of the recommendation is that we have included a Grampian condition, which is condition 3 on the application, which it will require the provision of a detailed surface water drainage scheme to come in. This is because it was considered by the Drainage Authority that it wasn't necessarily proven that you had to go to the outflow in terms of drainage, and whether or not actually it could be dealt with on the site itself, just discharged to ground. Now, what we've therefore tried to keep is maximum flexibility to be able to work out what the detailed scheme would provide. There is nothing in planning sense in terms of the considerations we've got about what has been provided. Ultimately, there are separate consents that will need to be in place before the development comes forward if it were to discharge to the watercourse through permits that would be required to do that. That's not under consideration within a normal planning application, and it's not a requirement that needs to be cleared before we can determine the application. So we do think that the conditions are sound. There is also a verification report condition, which is condition 4, which would need to prove that the surface water drainage system actually works before it's actually the building takes place. So the drainage has to be in place before use of the site. In terms of fire safety, this is something that we've talked about a number of times with the other facilities that have been looked at. So we have received comments from Kent Fire and Rescue. The submission that came in included a document that detailed how the guidance of the National Fire Chiefs Council had been looked at. The measures that are put in place to do that include looking at the spacing between units. Previous guidance from 2018 indicated that the spacing between units should be 6 metres between the batteries. That was changed with follow-up data in, I think it was 2023, and which could allow for the spacing to only be 1.5 metres between these units. However, this is proposing to have a 3 metre distance between those units. Also, one of the key provisions that needs to be put in place is about the water tanks that are to be used in event of an emergency. As mentioned, both of those are 120,000 litres. The aim of that is to supply 1,900 litres per minute for a duration of 2 hours in the event that you need to do boundary cooling. So the idea that something is burning on site, it's contained on site, and doesn't spread or result in any impact in that event. Now, as mentioned before, when we've talked about it in quite a lot of detail, there is only so much the planning system can do with regards to this. We've looked at the submission that's come in. Kent Fire and Rescue have given their detailed comments, and they do consider that the emergency plan which has been submitted with the application is sufficient to detail what the response would be. Now, that plan has been submitted in draft. You can see the comments of Kent Fire and Rescue about it within the report. The applicant is committed to working with Kent Fire and Rescue separate, once consent's been granted and prior to the operation of the site, to update that as necessary, depending on the technology at the point where this is built, because this technology is moving on, at a fair old pace as things go, and therefore a combination of the water tanks, the two accesses to the site, the spacing between the units, the provision of the emergency response plan, and indeed the penstock valve in terms of the drainage, adds up in terms of what we are conditioning with the plans to be sufficient for the purposes of planning to ensure that this wouldn't result in an undue risk by virtue of the site's layout in terms of fire safety. Just to pick up a couple of the policy points, if I'm going to skip back a little bit very briefly. Just mention's been made about where it sits within the designations surrounding there. So the site is outlined in red. The blue line is the ownership boundary of the site. You have the triple SI, which is the sort of the view, the very pencil-like shape across there. So you're separated by virtue of the solar farm and the road from that. You've then obviously got the Sandwich Road, which separates it from basically all of the other designations of the SAC, the SPA, the National Nature Reserve. So there is no direct impact from this. It is just about the surface water drainage and the need for a separate consent for the outflow were it to join the river, the watercourse. So there's also the fact that the site has a small area of grade 2 agricultural land. So that is something that's detailed in the report. This site, by virtue of historically what happened when the road was built and the subdivision of the land around there, means that this is not an agricultural unit in the same way that a lot of others would be. We don't consider that the loss of this small area that's in blue would detrimentally impact on the wider provision of agricultural land or the viability of any specific holding. The vast majority of the site is grade 5, which is not best and most versatile. So we don't consider there to be significant harm from the development were it to be approved in terms of loss of agricultural land. So overall, it is recommended for approval as it is considered that significant weight is given to the provision of battery storage with limited harm from the proposal, and that any harm is sufficiently mitigated from the conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
And do I have any speakers? Councillor Wing.
Thank you. I learned quite a lot actually, because the last battery application that I voted against actually reached out to us, and actually a lot of my fears were allayed by their technical guy. And I think this is part of the problem of the way planning is: the guys get on either side get 3 minutes, and you want questions about gas that's going to be not used in the future, and obviously our planners are not able to answer those questions because they're hugely technical. But I do so fire risk concerns, there are fire risk concerns, and the risk around these type of fires is they can't be put out, you just have to wait for them to burn. So there's always a fire risk here. But talking to the previous, they do everything they can to try and avoid that fire risk, and you have to hope there never is one, because it will be pretty devastating. But I'm assuming the attenuation basin is a thing that holds water. that's coming off their site. And I've looked at some of the paperwork, and I think most of the site is in flood risk 1, which is the lowest risk, apart from the bottom end. There's a bit at the bottom end where I think the attenuation tank is, that is in flood risk 2, which isn't the worst flood risk, but it's still a flood risk. But in its own document, it describes the site is in a high groundwater vulnerability, and we know that whole area is vulnerable to high groundwater vulnerability. And I also note there are concerns. We've never really had concerns from Kent County Council, so I think we should take them really seriously, actually, because normally they say everything's okay. And I'll read from their document. We note the applicant has undertaken, I'll go further down, notwithstanding the above, it has not yet been demonstrated that an off-site outflow is required. Infiltration testing is yet to be carried out to determine whether the use of permeable surfaces and infiltration through the basin could provide for surface water. Drainage without the need for off-site drainage outflow. It's the outflow that bothers me, because we've already got quite a lot, so we've got a cumulative impact on the Stour. Everybody's tipping into the Stour, and nobody seems to be looking at a whole overview of that river. To promote this, we recommend a condition requiring infiltration to be considered first, but I'm not going to approve this because I want to see that testing done and it brought back to here. You know, this is a site that if there are problems on it, it could be catastrophic. It's highly unlikely, but we have had highly unlikely events happen in this country and around the world, and best fires do occur. There doesn't seem to be anything on the cumulative impact of the area, and I think it's a statutory responsibility for us to consider that. So until that is done, it's also quite interesting because we don't seem to have the detail on this application that we did have on the previous one, the much bigger one. Are the battery units going to be lifted up, or are they flat? The other ones were lifted up 3 metres because they were in a flood zone, but there doesn't seem to be any lifting up of these units, and I would have thought it would have been good measure to lift them up, given this is an area of high groundwater vulnerability. We don't seem to have that same detail on the battery thingies.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason why we've put the Grampian condition on is because if the drainage, the outflow can be avoided, then taking account of exactly what you've said about groundwater and source protection zone, because ultimately infiltration will have to be proven to work from the site and not result in a flood risk, as well as the fact obviously of how anything that comes off the site, drainage going straight into what either controlled water, either the Stour or indeed into the source protection zone, that will need to be managed on a technical approval basis by KCC as the locally flood authority, which is why with any Grampian condition we consult with KCC as the locally flood authority through the condition. So I understand what you're saying in terms of you'd want to see it and bring it back. Ultimately, the determination that we would make is we would consult with KCC as the statutory consultee, and if they said, no, we are satisfied with it, we'd be recommending approval to you. That's what happens through the condition. So the condition is considered to be sufficient to dealing with the issue. So it's, and to come back on your point, we often do get objections from KCC about drainage. It's just that when it comes to members, hopefully those issues have already been resolved. I mean, in this instance, they have suggested a couple of conditions. We do think that in this instance, it's sufficient to have just the flat-out Grampian to say, okay, we will get the detailed surface water drainage in. As part of the condition, we will consult with KCC. If they sign it off, we go from there. Either infiltration on site or to the outflow. If it's the outflow, there is separate consent that would need to come in. You can see from the comments of the internal River Stour Drainage Board that they obviously want to be involved in the event of the outflow, which is obviously going to be part of it as well. So overall, it will be dealt with, but the detail of it has not been agreed. But it is considered on the basis of what's been put in that you can find a solution. Therefore, there's no reason to resist the planning application to say, well, there's no way you can drain this site to deal with surface water, because you clearly can, but it gives a maximum flexibility in terms of how you do it.
I mean, given there is representation from the parish council as well, I think we need to take that on board because they are concerned about their residents. It's important that we try and support residents or parish councils. There wouldn't be any difference to us refusing the application and asking for that to come back, delaying it, than actually what you're saying. And I sit here, I want to be fully assured that everything is in place before I can support this. It, very much like we did with the last one, you know, we put them through a bit of a ringer, and as a consequence, I think the quality of the application was a lot higher than certainly this one.
Councillor Kay Bright.
So the experts are, in terms of drainage, are the River Stour Internal Drainage Board, who are happy with the conditions, if I'm reading this right, are happy with the conditions that we're putting in place. Is that right? That's my first question.
I don't have page numbers, unfortunately, in the actual in my printed out copy. But the updated comments from the 12th of December, basically, they're satisfied by the additional information that came in. The one point that's raised by the officer is the separation between separate legislation and what the requirements might be and what planning can deal with, because in terms of necessary agreements for off-site drainage, that isn't something that we would be able to require through a planning application or through permission, because we can't secure them. They would need to be dealt with separately in terms of the actual discharge to the watercourse. So that's why you could see, I'm sorry, I don't have page numbers, but it's the reference that's made to the submission of evidence that necessary agreements for off-site works and access rights in place has been suggested. That's covered by other legislation. The condition that we've put on is basically saying you can't do any development until we know what you're doing with surface water drainage. Hopefully it can be dealt with all in the site. If it can't, then KCC will be the one signing off the actual off-site, discharge. So, we couldn't really expect anything more at this stage, and therefore the principle of the development's okay. But as with everything, we will have some conditions that will need to be discharged before the development can actually happen.
So essentially, they have done what they have to do to show that they're taking everything into account. This will obviously be dealt with from a KCC perspective when it comes to using drainage, and we've already had the River Stour Internal Drainage Board say yes. Look, we are talking about an emergency situation as well. There have been 4 fires in the UK since 2020. And there are over 160 sites currently in operation. It's not like these things are exploding all over the place. I'm struggling to see why we wouldn't say no when KCC are saying, nominally yes, the fire service are saying nominally yes, and the Internal Drainage Board are saying yes. They're the experts. I think we should defer to them.
Okay, well, I don't actually have any other speakers at the moment, so I'm now going to put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to vote. Would those in favour please show? And those against? And abstentions? Thank you. So that's carried. Thank you. Which means we can now move on to the last item on the agenda, R12, which is 1 The Square, Birchington. I have public speaking immediately at the start with Mrs. Sultana. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and members. I want to begin by explaining the circumstances in which these windows were installed, because context is important. During COVID, the original timber windows were severely rotten and one had actually fallen out. The accommodation above the shop was occupied by our staff, and we could not allow them to live in a building that was unsafe, exposed to cold. At the same time, I was undergoing cancer treatment, which placed our family under extreme physical and mental stress. We made every effort to find local tradesmen to install replacement timber windows, but during COVID, this was simply not possible. After exhausting these options, the only way to make the building safe and habitable was to install replacement windows. Importantly, we did not install standard UPVC. We specifically chose timber effect UPVC windows, which were significantly higher in cost than the price of standard UPVC windows. So the appearance remained as close as possible to the traditional timber and in keeping with the conservation area. I just want to also clarify that it was I who had approached the council after we had installed it after about 18 months. So the council weren't even aware that we had changed it because of how real they looked. And this decision was made out of necessity, not disregard. We want to be very clear that we do respect the council decisions and the importance of the conservation area. That is why that the downstairs shop front was repaired rather than replaced, and why we accept that UPVC is not generally supported in conservation areas, even though neighbouring properties, including the cowshed next door, have white UPVC windows. While the officer report accepts that any harm is less than substantial, however, it then concludes that the harm is not outweighed by public benefit, and we respectfully believe this is where there is a contradiction. There is a public benefit. Before the windows were replaced, they were rotten, unsafe, and visually harmful to the public eyes. Once the windows were changed, the appearance improved significantly. Neighbours were grateful that the building no longer looked neglected, and several people assumed the windows were timber because of the appearance. The proposal before you today would improve this further by reinforcing traditional timber detailing. In addition, established case law confirms that improved living conditions and residential amenity are material planning considerations. The improved safety, thermal performance and comfort of the accommodation above the shop, which is occupied by our staff, should therefore carry real weight in the planning balance. We would also respectfully draw members' attention to a nearby property at 40 Station Road, where also is a conservation area, where UPVC windows were installed and later modified with timber framing to improve their appearance, an approach our understanding was accepted by the council in comparable circumstance. The proposed timber lines would be made of coir, a high-performance sustainable timber created through a non-toxic process that makes it exceptionally durable, stable and resistant to rot and insects with long warranties. We're a small family business that have served Birchington for over 30 years, and this situation has been costly not only financially but emotionally.
I need you to wrap up. The buzzer has already gone.
I'm nearly finished. We're not asking members to ignore conservation policy. We're asking you to recognise a pragmatic harm reduction solution that balances heritage concern with real-world circumstance. We respectfully ask members to support this balanced compromise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I will now hand over to the Principal Planning Officer to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the site outlined in red here. It's in the square, in the conservation area, in a prominent location within Birchington. So this is the property here. And then viewing it from here, it's the white pitch roof property in this location here. Again, you can see the centre of the square here. And then these were the photos of the previous windows, the timber windows. So you can see the design of the original windows. So there's a single window within the front first floor elevation, two windows in the side elevation, and then there was another 3 windows in the other side elevation. Here, so again you could just see the original windows and how they looked in design. This is the building as it stands now. So these are the UPVC windows to the front. So there's a black one to the front and white ones to the side. And again a closer view of these windows to the side, and then you can see the 3 windows to the other side, also white. And then again a closer up view of those, and then another view of the windows. So there was 2 applications that were submitted in 2019 and 2020 for the removal of timber windows and replacement with UPVC windows. Both of those applications were refused. The windows were then changed following those 2 refusals from the timber to the UPVC. An enforcement notice was then served in 2021 for the removal of the UPVC windows from the front and side elevations and the reinstatement of the timber windows, and a compliance period of 4 months was given for that to take place. The enforcement notice was then appealed. The appeal was dismissed, and the inspector noted that in looking at the windows, the UPVC windows failed to replicate the distinctive arrangement of the square fan lights. So that's looking at the top part of the window here. So the original ones were larger squares at the top, and these are much smaller. So it failed to replicate the distinctive arrangement of the square fan lights. They appeared wider, flatter, a more modern finish and proportions to the previous timber windows. And despite the use of wood effect finish, it was found to be out of keeping with the mock Tudor appearance of the building. The inspector also noted that the side windows were clearly a modern insertion that did not replicate the traditional timber windows in terms of thickness and finish or use of glazing bars. And overall, the inspector concluded that the windows appeared bulky and modern insertions that detracted from the appearance of the building and made a negative contribution to the significance of the conservation area. Also worth noting as well, the inspector did consider the public benefits, and it was raised during that appeal that there was public benefits from replacing the windows, but the inspector concluded that these are private rather than public benefits, and considered that these benefits then didn't outweigh the harm to the heritage asset. So these windows have been refused twice, and then through appeal again refused. So this application before you is to retain the windows that you see, but also for the addition of timber strips to the outside of the window to give a more timber effect to the windows. So this is the existing front elevation, and then this is the proposed front elevation. So the bottom right hand side here is what the applicant has submitted, showing that is the material that they would use to put over the windows. We don't have any further detailed plans, like joinery details or anything, showing how that would be attached to the windows. So all we know is that they would use this timber and somehow stick it to the outside of the windows, but we don't have any further details than really this plan showing what that would look like. These three windows here are the window types for the side elevations. So I'll just show you those plans there. So these are that's the existing side elevation, and then this is the proposed, but obviously that's the actual window type here. So I don't think these elevations are actually correct in that the actual window type is the top right. So you can see that is a thicker window frame than currently there once the timber has been applied to the outside of the windows. And again, that's the other side elevation as existing. And then these are the proposed windows top left within the side elevation. So asking the applicant for details of how this would look, we've been advised to look at this site, which is in Westgate, which was an enforcement case a number of years ago where they had also put in UPVC windows, and then we did actually approve for the timber to be applied to the outside of the UPVC windows. So this is just how they look. So the applicant is advising this is how their design would look. So you can see these were white UPVC windows, and that is black timber that's been applied to the outside of those windows. Obviously, in this particular case, it's relevant to look at the actual building itself and how that differs to the application we're looking at, and the fact that that was a modern single-storey timber-clad building, and therefore by applying the timber to the windows, it was more in keeping with the cladding that was already there. Whereas looking at the actual building itself, within a prominent location within Birchton Square, it's considered that the application of this timber to the outside of these windows wouldn't be overly effective and would still result in some harm. So again, that's just how those look. So obviously you can see here, you can still see the UPVC windows behind the timber in this case. The other thing that's been raised by the conservation officer is that we don't have any details on how they would actually be applied to it. So we don't have any. We don't know how the longevity of that timber on the outside of it. We don't know how long it will last, how it will weather. So there's no information on that. Obviously, you can see on here. You can actually see on the right-hand side here that part of this timber has actually fallen off the window. So if it was applied in the same way, it's not really very long-term solution for the windows. So the conservation officer considers that they would be applied superficially to the existing UPVC frames. They wouldn't form an integral part of the window construction and wouldn't successfully disguise the modern materials. And they would also add to the bulkiness of the window because they're actually going to be increasing the depth of the windows. So you actually see a much larger frame than currently exists. It's considered that, therefore, the development would continue to detract from the character appearance of the conservation area. It wouldn't overcome the previous reasons for refusal, and we still consider that there are no public benefits that would outweigh this harm, and therefore it's recommended for refusal, partly on how it's contrary to the local plan policy on conservation areas, but also being within the Birchton Neighbourhood Plan Policy B1 looks to reinforce the village's historic and vernacular character, and materials are required to be high quality and reinforce local distinctiveness, and therefore it's considered it would also be contrary to policy B1 of the Birchton Neighbourhood Plan. So it's recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Speaking first, Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. It seems like I always call it, I think I'm going to start calling me George Formby, not when I'm cleaning windows, when I'm calling in windows, because it seems I'm always calling in windows. This one in particular, I appreciate, I won't go over the ground regarding, it is in a conservation area, but the look of it actually looks a lot better than it did prior. We state before, we're in a climate emergency. The owners are trying to, they appreciate that what they've done is done wrong, so they're trying to sort of meet in between and still keep the sort of thermal qualities while still regarding the appearance. But to me, I think actually they look much nicer from where you see it than the previous ones.
Thank you. Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. For me, this comes down to the appeal decision against the enforcement notice. So that's the last resort, serving an enforcement notice for something like windows. And for it to be upheld on appeal, it's quite a strong indication that the planning application should not be approved. And whilst I do have sympathy with the applicant, putting those wooden things over there will just make matters worse. And for me, I support the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
I'll come back to you. I have Councillor Packman next, please. You want to defer? Okay.
Just Councillor, technical. The actual application is not the same application that was actually rejected, because the initial application that was rejected didn't include the wooden coverings. It's actually not the same application in terms of rejection.
Okay, Councillor. Yeah, we will back this back and forth only for so long. But Councillor Alban, would you like to come back?
Only to say, Chair, that it's the same windows underneath. Let's face it. Come on.
In which case, I will now go to Councillor Packman.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it looks better. I think it makes the area look a lot neater. I think I forgot your name, sorry. The lady that spoke earlier said the neighbours have welcomed it. The only people that are against it are TDC in the conservation area. And I see why they're against it. I do understand. I'm not saying that they're wrong. But I think a bit of common sense needs to be applied into this. So do I support it or am I against it? I don't know. I'm against the rejection, yeah.
I'll let you try and work that out as we go along. Councillor Christian Bright next.
I think I'm going to join Councillor Packman, and I'm a bit baffled. Look, it's far from ideal that the original planning application was refused and the work went ahead anyway, and that there was an enforcement note. Like, I completely accept that. I'm looking at the pictures of what the building looks like now, and it looks fine. The next door building has UPVC windows too. we say it's out of character, but next door has UPVC windows quite clearly. I actually don't like the wood, and I just think, okay, refuse it, but don't worry about it now. Small businesses are under so much pressure as it is to give a small business who's made their business look better than it did. If you look at old photos, I'm absolutely baffled. Why would it enforce it? I get it. It's a conservation area, but the surrounding properties aren't in keeping either. I think sometimes we need to be a bit more pragmatic and show some common sense here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just come back on a few points there. In terms of the appeal decision that's been mentioned about the enforcement notice, obviously that looked at all of the issues that have been raised in terms of what's been installed, and that appeal was still dismissed, which obviously was against the enforcement notice, but through the enforcement appeal, the application was effectively being made to grant permission for what was there, and an inspector refused it, considering all of the points that have already been raised. Now, that isn't the proposal that's in front of you, members. The proposal is to put timber panels onto those existing windows that are there. It's worth noting that in this front elevation here, the inspector specifically talked about the proportions of that window in comparison to what was there in terms of those fan-light windows. Putting timber on top of that will not replicate what was there. I accept the fact that the comment being made about the previous windows were not in a good condition. That is not an excuse to change those windows without permission. Now, in this instance, I think that has happened. That's been looked at as part of the court proceedings that have occurred, and ultimately this application does need to be considered on its own merits, irrespective of all of that. But given the inspector's decision is a fundamental material consideration in subsequent applications, that specifically talked about the proportions of the windows that had been installed, which will not change through this application. On that basis, when taking account of that appeal decision, which members should do, it is considered that this would be harmful still to the conservation area, and therefore that's why we've recommended refusal.
Councillor Matterface.
Chair, we're talking about timber lining. Now, do we know, is it actually timber, or are we looking at strips of sort of like laminate? Or, I mean, you said you haven't got enough detail. I'm just trying to picture how, if it were timber, how they would get strips. It's just going to be very thin strips, isn't it? I mean, and it talks about gluing them on.
It is timber. I think the thing is that, so you can see here actually it refers to, I'm actually not going to try and say it, I'm going to spell it, ACCOYA, Accoya, which is a product which is used to clad things with timber, which is treated so that it's resistant to the normal, when you treat timber, just like you do. Sorry, there are details that we don't have, as Emma's mentioned, about exactly how it's fitted. Now, those issues, whilst we don't have that information, that is something, of course, that could be provided in due course. If members were minded to consider this acceptable, that could be dealt with via a planning condition. But it wouldn't, from our perspective, change the fundamental of what this would do, which is retain exactly the proportions of the windows that are there that the inspector has found to be harmful by putting these timber onto the existing frames.
Councillor Joanne Bright.
Thank you. I've had quite a lot of fun on Google Earth looking at the different how it's changed over the years since 2015 up until now, and to me, I agree with what's been said. It doesn't bother me at all, but I understand that obviously there's a process, and the inspector he's dug his heels in, but I don't think this is a better solution. So I agree that with your recommendation that we should be refusing it, because I don't think that's going to improve what's already there. I think that should be left alone, but obviously that's not for us to say. I'm interested to know what would the next step be once this has been refused. Is that the end of it, or what's...
So in terms of what's already happened, the applicant has already been prosecuted for non-compliance with the enforcement notice. The question, as the enforcement notice still stands, and that requires the windows to be removed and timber windows to be, put back in. Obviously, of course, we have to consider the application that's before us, which has obviously paused any further prosecution or action. Ultimately, in the event the application is refused, then a further consideration will need to be given about whether or not we, with legal advice being taken as we would do with any prosecution, whether or not we would continue to prosecute in the event of non-compliance with with the enforcement notice, which has obviously already been upheld and is still in force, saying that the windows should be removed and timber windows should be put in. So that's a separate decision, though, that obviously isn't one before members in terms of the subsequent, what happens next.
I'd like to ask a question. Picking up on what Councillor Matterface has said, the applicants would have to come back with a suitable replacement. And the key issue, as I can tell, is not just about its UPVC, but about the design and the size of the window. So if they came back with an application for UPVC of a design and size that fitted the look of the original design in the area, is that something that could be considered? Sorry, on the spot a bit.
Well, I think it is difficult because it's a hypothetical, and it very much depends on the details of what would come in. Ultimately, there are a few different issues, because you've got the front window, which has specific issues that the inspectors pointed out in terms of the proportions of the windows and the fanlights. Then you have the windows on the side, which are not as flush as the front window, which you will have seen from looking at the images, in terms of the bevel that you have of the plastic windows on the side, and they are also visible. So there are two different issues, really, for any resubmission. There is obviously, though, the appeal decision, which identifies the problems with having a UPVC window in comparison to the timber that was there. So that, again, it's theoretical. Ultimately, members are just considering what's there in front of them tonight in terms of the panelling being put on the existing windows.
Yeah, I think I'm just conscious that UPVC is gradually improving in quality and appearance and everything else. I have a flurry of other hands, so I'm now going to go back to, I'm going to start from that end in the order that I saw them. So it's Councillor Rattigan first.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, a lot of the discussion regarding actually a lot of us prefer it without the actual as it is at the moment. If we were to go against the officer's decision, could we then put in an amendment that it was the designs were re-amended without the wooden things on there? Because because as part of the application, it's two bits. It's saying that to the retrospective for the windows and to add the wooden panels. So couldn't we then, like we do before, then a new sort of, what's it called? What's the proposal you normally do? New amendment to have the first section, but the second section removed.
So the proposal that's in front of members is obviously to do what's been proposed. I have to say, if members were to approve what has previously been refused, identically to what's been refused, following an appeal decision which has upheld that refusal, subsequently the council prosecuting the enforcement notice for non-compliance to then approve the windows, is the textbook example of unreasonable behaviour in terms of decision making. So no would be the answer.
Councillor Packman.
It was a similar question of, can we not just leave it alone? Just leave it alone.
I think just to come back on the point about leaving it alone, there is, as I've mentioned, the subsequent decision. Following this decision, if it was made, the subsequent decision about what happens in terms of prosecution, if that were to come forward, that will be subject, as it always is, to what's expedient to do. So, yeah.
I get it, and I think it's an issue that as councillors we need to take away from this meeting, and all that sort of stuff. So,
I also, I'm going to add my own comment in here. I actually completely agree with Councillor Joanne Bright. Actually, what is proposed is even worse than what is actually already there. So, because it makes it bulkier and even less attractive. And at that point, I would go to Councillor Matterface.
I was just going to say, just to throw into this, my house is not listed or in a conservation area, but I have black UPVC windows that look like wood. I also have a garage where the back window is a white UPVC window because cheaper than timber windows are phenomenally expensive and they require maintaining. But I've got to have to stop and think about this because there's so many pros and antis and what you were saying about appeal decisions. Thank you. Just
Councillor Wing.
I think this is the third one we've had 2 meetings now, 2 planning meetings, and this is the third UPVC windows in a conservation zone, Addington Street, where the shop front wasn't affected, but I said no to I think I've called that one in actually. I said no to the UPVC on the side because they were all wooden down Ivy Lane. And then we had the one on North Down Road which was similar. Was it a retrospective where we just decided, well, the technology's moving on so fast, I do think we have to move. But now so one of my first things I'm going to say has got absolutely nothing to do with this. We have to look at how we articulate to people in conservation areas what they should and shouldn't be doing to their windows, because we keep bringing problems to a planning meeting, and it's all to do with, I don't think we're properly articulating to businesses and residential people who live in conservation areas of what they can and can't do. So that's, an aside. Maybe we can take that away because we wouldn't be in this situation, because I feel incredibly conflicted. I think putting the wood on it would be a big mistake. I'm quite happy with what's there now. Next door seem to have UPVC. I'd like to walk the whole road to see if there were more buildings with UPC and whether they had them on the side. It's incredibly difficult for small businesses at the moment. We'd just be throwing them further under the bus. I don't know. So if we were to make an amendment that insisted on the side windows being black, would that help us through this bad decision making that we possibly are going to be forced into?
So the proposal is what it is in terms of actually, any motion to vote down the recommendation for refusal, but then to propose to seek amendments to, colour the windows on the side. Obviously, that wouldn't resolve the issue with the windows on the front, and obviously the enforcement notice will still stand. That's going to, still there to say, well, that's in force. Obviously, if planning permission were to be granted for something like this, and that were to be carried out, then obviously that would override the enforcement notice, which is obviously why the application has been made. I think that, I'm hearing what members are saying, and I understand the perspective, and obviously the history of this site and the material considerations that come out of that history. Do I appreciate make it difficult for members in terms of upholding what the decision of the council has been, and obviously individual views that you may hold about what's in front of you. Clearly there will need to be, as I've said, a separate process of deciding what further action may or may not be taken about the enforcement notice that's in place to try and resolve the situation, and that is something that I will have to take away, and we will obviously discuss with legal. Ultimately, it has been found that the windows should be replaced with timber windows. That's every single step in the process has stated that. And I appreciate you suggesting alternatives. That isn't what's in front of members, and obviously I would struggle to think there would be consensus amongst members for the different solutions that might come forward. So that's why it's slightly tricky to look to seek those sorts of amendments.
Can I just be clear? We've basically got 2 options. We either vote with the refusal, in which case an enforcement will continue, or we vote against the refusal and the applicant has to do what they've stated in this planning application. So they're basically our only 2 choices. Fabulous.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. I'm glad you said it that way, because that's what I wanted to say. Okay, I've actually got Councillor Bright next.
I think I'm just building on what Councillor Wing says. So how I'm seeing this is I'm hearing broad consensus that the current application, i.e. the wooden panels, I don't think anyone is supportive of, right? So what I am hearing from this conversation is that we don't have to, but it sounds to me like we need to refuse this as an application and then trust to the process that officers have heard the conversation. I'm assuming that any previous prosecution, there's been a fine or something, has there? Or I think we need to look at the infringement that's been committed, look at how it's been punished and what comes next. I think you've heard what we've discussed, and that might inform maybe processes that go forward. So I think we should maybe move to vote, but that's up to you.
I do have Councillor Packman.
Can there not be an option of deferring this for officers to come back with legal advice on what they need to seek legal advice on? Because I think that would help our decision, personally.
Well, the decision that's before members doesn't need legal advice, which is the planning application. So it's the subsequent consideration of whether or not it's expedient to further prosecute the breach of the enforcement notice, which isn't subject to member decision. It's a sort of executive decision that's delegated down to the department. So in terms of, that's not a decision that the members are being asked to make, but to Councillor Bright's point, that consideration about whether or not to carry on effectively, you know, if assuming that the timber windows aren't installed as per the notice, then of course we have to consider whether or not it's expedient to keep fining effectively, which is what ends up happening if you go to the, you know, the court and they find, yes, there's, you know, still the enforcement notice is still in breach and therefore, you know, fines keep going. There is always going to be a consideration whenever the council takes enforcement action and subsequently goes to court about whether or not it's expedient to do so and whether or not it's within the public interest to do so. So that is a consideration that we would have to make against our enforcement protocol. And I will, of course, be, you know, guided by the fact of members and what they've expressed this evening. But that is a decision that's not going to be made tonight.
Okay, I'm going to bring Councillor Boyd in next.
Thank you, Chair. It does seem that we could decide to approve this, even though it would be atrocious and worse than it is now. But if we voted to reject the decision to, then they can carry on, and you force, or it feels like you're forcing us to make that decision. As Councillor Wing said, that we're going to throw these people under the bus or approve this. None of us want that, but that's how that's the choice we have. Thank you.
Councillor Orban.
Yeah, I think let's make this clear, shall we? A criminal offence has happened, right? They've not complied with an enforcement notice. That's a criminal offence. They, as the planning applications manager has said, you can continue prosecuting, but then it gets to a point where they go back to court, the magistrates may decide to take that further to another court with higher penalties, which could involve imprisonment for non-compliance of an enforcement notice. Now, separately to that as well, Mr Livingston, correct me if I'm wrong, but the council can actually take direct action to ensure that the enforcement notice is complied, and that means that the council could go and take all those windows out, replace them with the windows that are suitable to that building, and then charge the applicant owner for that work. So, for me, the simplest way of dealing with this is to refuse this application for the wood to go on, and then for the officers to take a look at what's happening, talk about the matter with the applicant, and then to see if there's another way that an application that can come in which would suit some of the members of this committee, because we're not all on the same page. Thank you.
Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add into this, I just want to make it clear that I could be quite happy to support this recommendation, but I want to make it clear, along with a number of others here, that I do not believe it would be in the public interest to take this further down the legal route, and I would not want to see our council, because we are the council, and I would not want to see our council taking any further legal action in this case. And I think it sounds like the majority of those who've spoken are of the same mind. So I think we're making it quite clear that that is the route that we would like the council to take if we were to agree to refuse this application.
Okay, we are kind of beginning to go round in circles a little bit. Councillor Rattigan has indicated he wants to speak again. It's going to be the last input I'm going to take, and then I'm going to ask Mr Livingston to sum up, and then we will move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate we're going round in circles a bit. Obviously, I completely understand. Obviously, Ian, that they've got to go by legislation. That if obviously the consensus here of the people here, actually we like the design there, but obviously Ian's explained then if we turn around and go right, actually we want to go with what the council's gone, what the appeal person's gone. If we was to allow how can I sort of put it? If Ian's saying obviously now taking into consideration what's been said at this panel, what our views. If then the council were to take further enforcement action, could we then bring that application back again, couldn't they? There's none that's often. Can you bring another application back? If you've already put the same application in once, can you bring it back again? If it's say like if you want to put the same one in again, could you do that or not? Do you get what I'm saying?
Councillor Rattigan, did you have any other questions or input? Okay, so I will now actually hand over to Mr Livingstone to answer some of the questions that have come up, and then we will move to the vote.
Okay, so you can technically submit the same application twice. After that point, the council can decline to determine an application. This is the first time that we've had a proposal to, fix the timber onto the windows. But in terms of, I suppose, in terms of the summary of where we are, the proposal itself, obviously, officers find unacceptable. It is correct that I think it's been characterised as, well, there's the enforcement notice means that the windows should be removed and with timber put in. This is the alternative solution to dealing with it, and it would remedy the prosecution and the enforcement notice, and it would resolve the issue if this was approved. In the event that, as recommended by officers, it is refused, there is a subsequent set of determinations about whether or not we would continue with prosecution. That will, of course, consider what's outlined in our enforcement protocol about what's in the public interest. The councils will know the extent of which we have various enforcement cases that run in due course, and we will have to make a determination what to do. Councillor Orban has mentioned about options that are available to the council. That is the case. But of course, it still goes through the lens of what's in the public interest and what is, what would have to make most difference. It is still important to note that this is still an application, still on its own needs to be considered. It has been subject to public consultation. You can obviously see that in the report in terms of where the comments have come from in terms of the proposal. It is though the application that's being considered. You are not considering whether or not the council should or should not take further proceedings to court about this issue. It is just about whether or not cladding, putting timber onto these existing windows is acceptable in terms of its impact on the conservation area.
Okay, so I will now move to the vote. Those in favour of refusing with the officer's recommendation, please indicate. Those against? And any abstentions? So that's carried. Thank you. So, thank you very much. That now concludes public speaking for this meeting. Councillor Alban and Councillor Kay Bright need to leave. We will take a very brief agenda. No, what?
Oh, do you want to? I mean, we're just going to read out the list. Okay.
Okay. So I'm now going to call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications as soon as Councillor Alban and Councillor Bright are out of the room. If any member wishes to reserve an application, will they please call out as the clerk reads? Hang on a minute, we're just waiting for Councillor Bright to... He's working, yeah, he's getting there. Yeah, no, I don't need you to walk really slow, Councillor Bright. I just need you to get out. Thank you. Okay, over to the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We have AO4, that's North Down Park, Park in Margate. AO5, Chris Park in Chris Park Close, that's Bechington. AO6, land adjacent to 10 Guy Close, Broadstairs. AO7, car park, Meeting Street in Ramsgate. AO8, Ramsgate Sports Centre, High Street in Ramsgate. AO9, Albion Place Gardens in Albion Place in Ramsgate. A10, that's Charlotte Court in Ramsgate. And A11, Liverpool Lawn Gardens, Liverpool Lawn in Ramsgate.
Thank you. Can I have a proposer to move that the applications that have not been reserved be determined in accordance with the officer's recommendations? Councillor Uzeki and Councillor Matterface seconded. Do members agree? Thank you. For the benefit of the public, I will now call upon the clerk to read out the applications that have been determined.
Thank you again, Chair. We have AO4, which is North Down Park in Margate. AO5, Chris Park in Chris Park Close in Bechington. AO6, land adjacent to 10 Guy Close in Broadstairs. AO7, car park Meeting Street in Ramsgate. AO8, Ramsgate Sports Centre in High Street, Ramsgate. AO9, Albion Place Gardens, Albion Place in Ramsgate. A10, Charlotte Court in Ramsgate. And A11, Liverpool Lawn Gardens, Liverpool Lawn in Ramsgate.
Thank you. That concludes the business for tonight's meeting, and good night.